unexpected events this last weekend. I almost died, but fortunately I didn't. So, got a renewed lease on life, and we're going to make the most of it.
On February 27th, 2022, I had a rare type of aneurysm that ruptured and lost about half the blood in my body before doctors could find it and patch it up. If they hadn't found it, I wouldn't be sitting here today, which is a really scary thought, but at the same time, in a way, I am grateful that this happened because it really kind of has had a profound effect on me that has made me excited for things to come in the future in a way that I really haven't been in a long time. I think there will be some changes in the channel as a result of it, which means I want to share it with you guys. I'm going to give a warning that this is going to be a pretty graphic and raw video. The surgery was pretty intense. If you're watching this with your kids, you might want to preview the video before you watch it with them just to make sure that they're ready for it. So this all started on Friday, February 25th. I was at a conference called Workbench Con, which is probably my favorite time of the year. It's a conference for people who do social media and make stuff. So really, it's just kind of a yearly reunion with all my YouTuber friends, and we just have a great time catching up. At about 2:30 in the afternoon that Friday, I was heading up an escalator at the hotel where the conference was with Kat and my buddy Chris Crawford, and all of a sudden, I got this really intense pain in my stomach. At first, it felt kind of like one of those sudden, I just got to get to a bathroom real quick type pains. But it just wasn't quite like that. So at this point I decided, well, I better just go to the hotel room and lie down. And I was up an elevator ride, and by the time I was at the hotel room door, I could barely even walk anymore. The pain was just so intense. I kind of just stumbled into the room and crashed into the bed. You know, I'd never really felt anything like this. Normally with pain, you can kind of move around or crawl up in the fetal position and just find some way to make the pain die down and get comfortable. But there was no position that made this better. It was just intense, like the alien in Aliens movie was about to like burst out of my stomach. So as embarrassing as it was at a conference full, all my friends, we called the ER team. They came, did some tests, and said, yeah, you got to get to the hospital ASAP, put me on a stretcher, and carted me out of the hotel. In the waiting room of the ER, I started just vomiting because of the intensity of the pain. And then that acid inside there from the vomiting, it was just like amplified the pain. I can't really even describe it. So once I got to the hospital, they did a CT scan and took some x-rays and really didn't see anything that looked wrong internally other than my stomach was pretty distended. So the initial diagnosis was just gastritis, basically a huge bubble of pressure of gas in my stomach. They gave me some heavy pain meds, some liquid lidocaine to kind of drink and numb my insides, Gas X, Pepsid, a whole sort of slew of stuff, and put me in an observation room. Well, after 3 or 4 hours in the observation room, something weird happened. I could feel all of a sudden something like a shot in my lower chest or stomach. I knew immediately like something had gone wrong. The pain was like already 9 of 10 and relentless, but this was like 10 of 10. I couldn't even move. I couldn't breathe. I could barely talk because I was so short of breath. At this point, once the doctors came in, they could tell just from my expression and the fact I could barely move that something wasn't right. So they rushed me into a CT scan, and this time they saw a lot of blood in the abdomen. There was definitely some internal bleeding. So they decided that the surgeon, Dr. Patel, should operate immediately to try and stop it. And as I'll explain in a little bit, one of the really scary things about the condition that I had, the type of pseudoaneurysm, is that because it is such a rare condition, it is almost always misdiagnosed. And it's not really a fault of the doctor, it's just that freaking rare. Now, the initial diagnosis here was that it was an ulcer that had ruptured, and the repair procedure is a laparoscopic procedure where there's a small incision and they can go in and fix it. And Dr. Patel thought that I could probably be out of there within a couple days, which sounded awesome. So they rushed me off to the operating room, and things get kind of groggy here because I was under general anesthesia, knocked out. The next thing I really kind of remember is waking up in a different hospital room, and Dr. Patel was there, and there was a few nurses. This is kind of when things started to get very real. I remember looking at Dr. Patel and kind of saying, did we get it? And him just kind of shaking his head, and I could see that he was really worried. It was clear it wasn't the ulcer that we thought. They hadn't really found the source of the bleeding. They thought that hopefully it had stopped a little bit and they drained all the blood out of there to hopefully alleviate some of the pain. But they were kind of still trying to diagnose what was happening. I remember at some point a nurse coming in to give me more pain meds, and then a shocked look on her face, and they put sort of looks like little bottles, but basically drainage holes in my sides of my stomach in case there was more bleeding, and those had filled up and were overflowing. I'd lost like another half liter, a liter of blood. So at this point, that meant like over half the blood in my body had been lost. I remember a nurse coming in and grabbing my hand, and then her beginning to say a prayer that they could save my life. And that was really, I didn't know. I was like, does she just do this with everyone, or is this something like am I gonna die? What's going on? The next thing I know, I remember them telling me that there was a second surgeon coming in. They were basically gonna have to do some sort of like full open exploratory surgery to try to find where the bleed was happening. And I asked the doctor, you can find it, right? And both of them just kind of looked at me and kind of said they didn't know. So the last thing I remember is them sort of doing a blood transfusion to make sure I had some blood in my body, and then shooting me up with some fentanyl to whisk me off to the operating room. Again, anesthesia, so all of it gets kind of blurry. But when I woke up next, came to and looked around, and I just remember there being a bunch of people in the hospital room, and it kind of seemed like a party. I think everyone was so relieved that they had found the location of the aneurysm and stopped the bleeding. I didn't realize at this point really how close it had come. And I guess the first thing that made me realize how close it was probably a couple days afterwards as I was recovering. A day later or so, they came to inspect the wound, make sure there was no infection, and they took it off, and I kind of looked down and I saw the incision for the first time and was like, whoa, this is like a Game of Thrones style thing. They basically just kind of had to slit me open and kind of pull my insides out and start searching as quickly as they could because they were racing against the clock to find the source of the bleeding. So now that I've had kind of time to go back and understand, to talk to the doctors about what happened, I guess I can explain a little bit more what was going on inside my body and what the condition was. And I got my notes here just in case so I can make sure I get all the terms correct because I'm not the best with all these medical terms. Pseudoaneurysm is basically when a blood vessel wall of an artery is damaged and the blood starts collecting in the surrounding tissue. The condition was called a vascular artery pseudoaneurysm, or a VAPA, because if you've ever been in a hospital, like, it's acronyms for everything. And this was a specific type of VAPA, a superior mesenteric artery pseudoaneurysm, or an SMA. The superior mesenteric artery is sort of this ring of blood vessels that carries blood throughout your digestive system. There was a sub-branch of that, which is where the rupture occurred. So the mortality rate for these types of aneurysms, based on my research, is anywhere between 40 and 60%. So it is kind of crazy to think that my life was basically a coin flip that night. As far as recovery goes, biggest thing I have to recover from is that massive incision they made. I think it was 28 staples in total. At first, just any movement was difficult and painful because you use your abdomen muscles for so much. But you can't just sit in bed. I mean, sit in bed, your muscles start atrophying really fast. It's about, I think, 2 days after surgery, they sent in a physical therapist to kind of help me sit up out of bed without moving my abdomen and move into a chair in the hospital room. Then the next day, they had an occupational therapist come in to actually make a lap walking around the ICU with a little help. Honestly, it was pretty humbling to go from being someone who's building out this kitchen around me to all of a sudden could barely even walk. But recovery, fortunately, has been pretty quick. A few days later, and stuff is healing nicely. You can see we got all the staples out. I got out of the hospital after a week. My mom flew down to Atlanta to be with me and came back to Chicago to kind of help me set up here and get going. Love you, Mom. Thank you. And now, 2 weeks later, still got to wear this thing, no heavy lifting for a couple more weeks. But overall, I should be back to 100% after 4 or 5 weeks. Now, a lot of people are probably gonna have questions about, well, what actually caused that pseudoaneurysm in the first place? The truth is that it's kind of impossible to know. A probable theory is that I had a snowboarding accident about 8 years ago where I was getting a little aggressive riding in the trees and kind of hit a tree. The bruising was crazy, but at that time, the bleeding pretty much stopped immediately. And I called a few different doctors that I knew, and the verdict was, if you're not getting lightheaded or faint, that means that the bleeding has stopped and you don't need to go to the hospital.
It's not a tumor.
The bruising was just disgustingly nasty. Here, put up a shot here of what it looked like 2 weeks after the injury. But at that point, everything seemed fine. Even if I had gone to a doctor, they wouldn't have been able to detect this little pseudoaneurysm at that point. The scary thing about this is that it's such a needle in the haystack. There's no way to detect it early. And you don't really know until something really bad happens, like what happened to me. And then even once that rupture happens, there's usually a misdiagnosis at first because there's so many other things that are way more common that can cause the same type of pain. Unless you're like at a hospital with some really, really, really good doctors like I had, your chances aren't good. So overall, I just feel like insanely lucky and like I have a new lease on life. So what does all this mean for me, for the channel? I feel excited. Like I feel lucky to be alive. Again, I was in the hospital room. It gave me some time to reflect on the last few years, which have been an amazing journey in this building, but the building at the same time has taken over my life, and I haven't been able to spend as much time with family and friends and people I care about. I will 100% be finishing this. I mean, the first thing I am gonna do is start working on the master bathroom, but there are a lot of other things in my life. So going forward, I'm definitely going to be taking more time to do the things that I love and am passionate about beyond just renovating this building. So in some ways that'll affect the content on this channel. Top of the list is probably scuba diving. Starting about 15 years ago, I got scuba certified and started making it a point to go on a long 2-week dive trip to a really remote location in the world. I've gone diving in the Galapagos, Fiji, French Polynesia, Indonesia, many places that I just blow my mind. And I really do want to get back to that. Now, second thing is snowboarding, which potentially could have been the source of all this back from that injury that I had 8 years ago. But it's now been over 3 years, 4 years at least, since I've been on a snowboarding trip. And I used to try to go on 1 or 2 snowboarding trips every single year. And I'm no Shaun White at all. I enjoy doing sort of some backcountry stuff and deep powder, all that sort of good stuff. And I definitely need to get back into that and do that a little bit more. And because I am a YouTuber now, full time, I kind of think it would be fun to make some content about these other interests, dive trips, snowboarding trips. I don't know, let me know what you guys think, if you would like to actually see that sort of thing. And if you would, should it go on this channel, or should I maybe just have a sort of second industrial lifestyle channel where I put that sort of content so it lives in a separate place? I think maybe the second channel makes more sense, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. So one other thing I wanted to mention is just how much the outpouring of support from the maker community, the community of YouTubers, and the community of all of you has meant during this time. In all the comments in the last video, wishing me well when I mentioned that I'd had a surgery was just awesome, and really contributes to that feeling I have now, which is really just one of excitement and inspiration to make the most of everything I've got coming up in the future. I had a lot of people asking me if they can do anything to help. I do have health insurance, which is going to cover a lot of the crazy, crazy costs that are associated with a week in the hospital and 2 surgeries. But there are going to be some additional expenses, and obviously I can't kind of do my normal content for a month. I don't really want to do a GoFundMe or something like that. I just don't quite feel right asking for that. I do have a Patreon if you're interested in supporting there. I love and appreciate all my patrons. There's a link in the description for that. And I think that's it for this video. Having kind of told the story again, I'm like even more excited and inspired to get going. Tomorrow, Bart Komar is gonna help me go drive around Chicago. We're gonna go look for trucks. I'm finally gonna buy a truck. I was holding out for the Cybertruck. It just got delayed again until who knows when. So I'm gonna do it. And I know people are crazy passionate about their trucks. I'm actually gonna make a video on that whole truck buying experience, looking for the ultimate maker truck in what I understand is the worst truck buying environment ever, but we're gonna make it happen. I think it'll be pretty fun, so keep your eye out for that. That is it for this time, and I'll see you guys next time.